Our center is housed within the Pacific Inclusive Education Research and Resources Center, or PEER for short. PEER is managed by faculty and staff at the Center on Disability Studies, located on the University of Hawaii at Manoa campus. The overarching goal of our center is to nurture untapped talents through inclusive practices. To reach this goal, we host monthly speaker series as well as in-person symposium that focus on building awareness on neurodiversity and twice exceptionality. Our speaker series and symposiums are made possible through funding from the U.S. Department of Education Jacob Javits Gifted and Talented Education Program grant. Each month of our speaker series will focus on a different topic and perspective from well-known speakers in the areas of inclusion, neurodiversity, and education. And I'm happy to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Daniella Karidi. Dr. Karidi is the founder of ADHD Time, specializing in empowering individuals with ADHD during major life transitions, such as going to college, starting a new job, and reaching retirement. With extensive experience supporting diverse populations through these pivotal moments, Dr. Karidi is dedicated to promoting diversity, neurodiversity, and enhancing ADHD awareness. Dr. Karidi earned her PhD from Northwestern University, focusing on memory and ADHD, and holds a master's degree in learning disabilities from the University of Haifa. She has advanced training in executive coaching from the College of Executive Coaching and in ADHD coaching from JST Coaching and Training. As a committed neurodiversity advocate, Dr. Karidi has contributed to various publications, workshops, and conferences, furthering the understanding and support of individuals with ADHD. Her dedication to this cause is underscored by her previous role managing the Center for Students with Disabilities at Loyola University Chicago. And so without further ado, please welcome Dr. Karidi.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. I'm really thankful for being here, and I'm very excited to be sharing some info about ADHD and college. I'm assuming you guys can see my slides. Yes? Perfect. I say a lot we because I also, in addition to being a researcher in this field and a professor, I have ADHD and dyslexia, a learning disability. I also am a parent of a child with ADHD and myself also have an adult with ADHD, my father. So when I say we, I mean it both academically and personally. I have a living experience with it. I also make many mistakes with spelling. So if you find any, please forgive me or let me know so I can fix them for next time. What are we going to be talking about? So we are going to be focusing on what is ADHD. We're going to talk about challenges. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between college and high school. We're going to talk about strategies students with ADHD can use to address some of these challenges. We're also going to talk about some tips that faculty and teachers can use. And of course, some insights for parents. At the end, I'll give you guys some time to answer questions. If you have a question that you want to share, feel free to use the chat. But also you can email me at the end if I didn't have a chance to answer your question or you didn't feel comfortable sharing in this forum. I can be reached at dk@adhdtime.com. So my initials, dk@adhdtime.com, if you have any questions or follow-ups. I will also be sharing this slide presentation with the organizers, so you could be using this information from the slides directly too. I have a small request from you guys. While you're listening to the presentation, I really would like you to be active learners. And in order to be an active learner, I need to give you some activity, some assignment. And my assignment to you is, if you're able, please write to yourself the answer to these two questions. What strategy can you see yourself implementing? If you're a student or if you're a teacher, or maybe the tips for the students are something that even as a teacher you might use. So what strategy you might implement in your life? And hopefully write down at least one new thing you learned about ADHD. So what is ADHD? So ADHD is basically the initials of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is a chronic neurodevelopmental disorder that affects the function and the development of the brain. I say ADHD, even though it really is ADD, because historically there were two types of ADHD, the one that has hyperactivity and one that doesn't, and we gave them two different names. But today we use one name for both, a name that I'm not a big fan of, and I'll explain a bit later why I don't like it. But basically, when I say ADHD, I mean people that have challenges with attention with and without hyperactivity. So ADHD is highly genetic. We know of at least 7 genes that are involved in ADHD, but we also don't know enough to be able to use genetic tests to evaluate ADHD. And we unfortunately cannot use any blood work or blood test, or there's no neuroimaging that we can use to help us evaluate ADHD. This is a brain-based syndrome. And when I say that with 100% confidence, because we have many imaging studies that show differences between the brains of those with ADHD and the brains without ADHD. We also know that it's about regulation of the frontal lobe. And specifically, we're talking about executive functions, which I will explain in a second. So executive functions really, like if you think about that front of your lobe as a conductor or a CEO of a company, that is all the executive functions. It's the ability to pay attention, use working memory, self-control, organize, plan, any social skill, any emotional regulation. That is all managed by the frontal lobe. And what we know is that individuals with ADHD have significant delays in the development of the executive functions. When executive functions can be improved, they know that we know that they develop as we age. The average expectation is for an adult to develop their executive functions by the age of 25. So it's not something that we are born with totally function. And we do know that this delay is significant and negative. The DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that we use in the United States to evaluate people's mental proficiency and to label different conditions, has ADHD with 3 types of categories. It is impulsive, which is kind of what you think about someone that has difficulty focusing, someone that has difficulty being with distractions, the idea of like almost like a space cadet, that kind of fits the inattentive type. The other category of symptoms is impulsive hyperactive. And that is kind of if you think about that kid that jumps around and walks around and can't stop moving, that adult that's shaking their leg under the table consistently, the person that keeps on interfering in your conversation, the person that makes impulsive decisions, that is under the impulsive. And the combined category is someone that has symptoms from both groups. And this is the point where usually people tell me, but like everyone has a little bit of that. Well, having a little bit is not the problem. It's having a lot of it is when it's a problem. So in order for it to be ADHD, it has to be obviously diagnosed by a professional, hopefully from the mental health, psychology, psychiatry. This doctor usually would use resources like interview family members, questionnaires to teachers. In addition to that, they check that the symptoms fit one of those categories we just talked about. They also want to make sure that it exists for more than 6 months. They want to make sure that it exists for more than 2 settings. It can't be that you only are distracted when you're, at soccer. It has to be in more than 2 settings. And if you're an adult that we want to evaluate if you have ADHD, it's really important that the symptoms started when you were a child, even if you weren't diagnosed as a child. And then, of course, we want to make sure that these symptoms have a significant negative effect. We're not going to say you have a disability if it's not affecting your life. And the last thing is, in the past, we used to say that it could not be that you have ADHD and a bunch of other conditions. Like you couldn't have ADHD and autism, or you couldn't have ADHD and anxiety. And today we actually understand that the brain doesn't work like that. And you obviously can have multiple challenges, co-occurring conditions The most common co-occurring conditions are ADHD and dyslexia. The second one is ADHD, anxiety/depression, and the third one is ADHD and autism. So a few ADHD fun facts, or just facts I would like to share with you. So one of them is every ADHD individual is unique like a fingerprint. You met one person with ADHD, you met one person with ADHD. But like fingerprints, they have some things in common. Like obviously all our fingerprints are on our fingers. So when we think about individuals with ADHD, they have some commonalities. And we're going to be talking today about the average student with ADHD, the average participant. But we're also going to be talking about colleges, and there are also 4,000 and something colleges in the United States, and they're very different too. But we can still talk about them in some kind of generalization. So that's kind of what we're going to do today. But with you in life, if you meet an individual with ADHD, you can use all the knowledge you learned today to kind of have a picture of expectations, but you also need to remember that that individual might have a different life experience, a different symptom list, might have, a different co-occurring conditions. So you need to give that person an opportunity to share with you how their ADHD is affecting their learning or life. ADHD is not limited to children. There's about 3 to 8% currently diagnosed with ADHD in the world, which is approximately 360 million individuals. And this is a very high number of undiagnosed. People like always say, oh, that's overdiagnosing. And we at the research world think we're underdiagnosing because unfortunately, a lot of studies show that minorities, low income, and also some social groups have a lower rate of diagnosis. So this number doesn't represent what we really believe. We believe the number should be about 12 to 17%. So underestimate, not over. ADHD represents and occurs both in men and women. It does come with a little symptom differences. A lot more men fit in the impulsive hyperactive, and a lot more women fit in the inattentive type. We do know that as the condition and as ADHD becomes more familiar to the world, we're having an increase in diagnosing in women. And especially since we are now able to diagnose in adulthood, because what we're finding is that women are coming to get help later in life compared to men. My youngest clients that I support, which I work with their parents actually, but will be a 7-year-old. And my oldest client is 74 at the moment. So there is no age limit to diagnosis, and there is no age limit to receiving treatment. Talking about treatment, research shows that the most effective treatment for ADHD is the combination of medication and therapy or coaching. I am not going to be talking about medication at this presentation, but I am a strong believer that there are people that it changes their world, kind of like wearing glasses. It really makes a significant difference. So the research also kind of agrees with me that therapy combined with medication is the best combo. Okay, so this is the part where I start talking about college. And I want to talk specifically about some of the challenges students with ADHD shared with me. So this list is just the challenges that individuals with ADHD have shared with me. I want to start with attention. And when we think about attention, people usually think about just being distracted. But a lot of students with ADHD report a problem of hyperfocus too, where they're like in the middle of playing a video game or reading a really, really interesting article and they miss their class. So there's negative effects of attention challenges that are not only in the difficulty to stay focused, but it's also in the difficulty to shift your attention. There's struggles with time management, procrastination, difficulty keeping track of assignments, schedules, materials. Think about kind of, I don't know, in my office of disabilities when we were working, we had to have like extra calculators and extra computer chargers because 1 out of 5 forgot or lost or couldn't find during finals, those stuff. It has a significant effect if you arrive to your final and you don't have your calculator. Finding the students report difficulties in starting tasks and completing tasks without having someone help them in the process. Missed deadlines, trouble planning and prioritizing, that leads to a lot of burnout. Struggle with remaining and recalling information. I would like to take a moment because working memory and memory was my research area. So I want to stop a second and emphasize that individuals with ADHD don't have general memory issues. What they do have is difficulty with working memory, which is if I give you a list of numbers and I say 7, 8, 9, 10, and I ask you now to manipulate that information, change the order, do something with those numbers, that is working memory, and that's where individuals with ADHD struggle. So that's one type of memory struggle they have. The other type they have is it's really challenging to remember what you did not pay attention to. So if you are distracted, you struggle recalling information. There's difficulty regulating emotions, which leads to social challenges, roommate issues, difficulty with responsibilities, and challenge asking for help is something that a lot of my students report. And then challenge of managing medication. So remembering to take the medication, or I had one student say that she put her allergy meds in the drawer, and then like only when she left school to pack to go home at the end of the year, she found them, because what is out of sight is out of mind. And if she would have had them next to her bed, she would have taken them, but because they were in the drawer, that wasn't going to happen. And then of course, we're talking about some sleep challenges. If anyone has more challenges that they're experiencing with their family or students, they're welcome to add them to the chat. Although at the moment, I cannot see the chat, but I will take a peek in a moment, I promise. So why and what, and I really want to talk a bit before we go to the why and what, to the differences between college and high school and why is it so different? And I think some of these are kind of obvious, so I'm going to go quick a bit because we're going to run out of time. So one thing is independence is different. Social life is significantly different between college and high school. Living arrangements. You could be in a dorm or an apartment versus your parents' home. The age groups, class sizes. At college, you can find yourself in a class size of 200. You can find yourself in a Zoom of 50 people. You can find yourself in a small class of 5 versus a college. It's more, high school was more consistent. Your class sizes tend to be more consistent. There's a lot of flexibility in college with your scheduling, with your choices of classes, which you do not have at high school. At high school, you come in the morning, you leave at the end of the day, and you really, you do your homework in the afternoon or your after-curricular. It's kind of very set. There's a very different responsibility set. There's different academic expectations. You're expected to analyze data at college and have an opinion. And during high school, there's a lot more of recitation and repetition and giving back the teacher kind of what they taught you. Testing and grading is significantly different in college. You have a lot less tests that affect your grade a lot more, and you have a lot less opportunities to catch up if you mess up. And then accommodations are different, and that is what I'm going to talk about in the next slide. High school accommodations are significantly different than college accommodations. High school accommodations focus on promoting success. College accommodations are about access, reasonable accommodations that allow you access. And the legal framework for the two is also significantly different. For high school, we're talking about the IDEA, and for college accommodations, we're talking about the ADA. Again, significantly different. And when we talk about college, again, reasonable accommodations, which is different than high school. This table is a lot, so I'm going to kind of walk you through it. But the idea is that at high school, the student and the school develop the plan, and maybe the families involved. But the school can identify a student that's struggling and start the process. The school can reach out to the parents and say, I think your kid is struggling, and here's it. Versus at college, you have to, as a student, be able to self-advocate, to walk into a space or find a web page, fill out a form. There's a process that you have to actively do in order to receive services. The type of services that you could receive are also different. Some of them are the same, like extended time, but some of them are different. And the biggest difference that relates to ADHD is you can't do usually at college a reduced workload. Usually you also cannot totally replace the evaluation method. So if the class has a paper, you usually cannot just go and replace that with a test, if which is possible sometimes in high school. The documentation that is needed is also sometimes different because it has to come from the student, and many times there's some forms that have to be completed, and it has to be relevant, and please have it from the right professional. When I was the director, we got a letter from a veterinarian recommending accommodations for ADHD. So it has to be obviously from the appropriate professional. Parental involvement is very different. At high school, it's actually illegal to change a student's IEP without letting a parent know. Versus in college, there's very limited access that parents are allowed, and it really is up to the students to open the door for the parents. So as a faculty member, as an advisor, as a disability specialist, your responsibility is to communicate with the student. The student is always welcome to share that information with their parent, to email that, to even share their password if they want with the parent so they can see everything. But that is up to the student, not you as a disability specialist. I will say that there are universities that have several special transition programs, and part of the special transition program does include communication with parents. There are programs that are specially designed to provide services for students with disabilities that do include that component, but it doesn't come from the legal responsibility of the accommodations. It would come from those specific programs. So it's not impossible, but it's not the standard, and it is not a requirement. And then the optional support services, like you can't get OT or PT through college usually from your accommodations, but sometimes you have extra stuff that you don't have. Sometimes you have coaches and tutors. But whatever it is you have at college, the student has to actively seek it. It's not automatically given to them. There's not going to be a disability individual coming into class to take them out and take them to tutoring. Okay, so that is an important part. So here's just an example of the self-advocacy and the responsibility that falls on the student when we talk about ADHD accommodations. So first thing, the student has to find the website with the information of the disability and accessibility services, or their phone number, or the building location. So they have to find it. Then they have to find the form where they need to register, okay? After that, they need to complete and submit the registration form in a timely manner. So this is a question I get asked a lot. What if my student doesn't want to start with registering at the university? They want to come in later. They want to try without it, or they get diagnosed later. So there is no retroactive accommodations at any university. There is no such thing as getting retroactive accommodations. What you have is when you come in and self-identify and you complete the process and you're eligible to accommodations, that's when the accommodations will start. So it's really important to tell your students or their faculty that you can't go back and fix it. So it's better to go register as early as possible. If you are lately diagnosed, second semester, fourth year, a week before graduation, you can still walk in the door into a disability office and register and become registered and receive services, but they have to be in a timely manner. So it's kind of, if it's day before finals, it'll be very hard to get your accommodations for finals. And different offices might have different cutoff points for that. But at any time, a student can register during their whole academic career, even if they haven't done it when they started the year or their degree. After you complete submit the form, usually you have a documentation that you have to submit. In the case of ADHD, that documentation usually has to be within 1 to 3 years. It has to clearly say what disability you have and how it's affecting your learning. Then you need to schedule an appointment. This is the interactive part of the accommodation process. What is really important about the interactive part is that maybe I need extra time, but Danny, he actually just needs a quiet room. So even though we might have the same exact diagnosis of ADHD and learning disabilities, our needs and our learning styles and our experiences might be significantly different. And this interactive process with the specialist at the campus helps figure out what are the accommodations that are needed. Also, some accommodations are not appropriate for some degrees. I can say that an extended time is not helpful at the dance final, okay? Or if you're taking environmental science and you're going to be physically at the beach exploring the effects of the laguna on the houses nearby, it will be really hard to record that lecture on the beach. So the accommodations need to be appropriate for the student, but also for the study environment. And that's where the interactive process comes out. Then you need to be receiving a letter of accommodations. And that letter of accommodations, you need to bring to your professors. Each university has a different procedure, how you communicate with your professors. But again, it falls on the student. So this is where a lot of work can happen before you come to campus. This is the opportunity for parents to help the student to practice all these steps, to support them. This is an opportunity for the students to learn what they really want to ask at this appointment, what really works for them, what really they need. So here are some examples of typical accommodations. I did not even go into housing or dining accommodations, which is a totally different kind of idea. So I'm going to start talking and shifting to talking about some strategies. So my number one strategy for students is connect and build a support team. Start with your school's Office of Disability/Accessibility, but you also have additional supports on campus. And this support team is not always the people you automatically think about. So there's health officers, there's doctors, there's nurses, there's a pharmacist you can reach out to many times. A lot of campuses have writing centers, tutoring centers, and obviously it's really important to remember that faculty and professors are also part of your support team. You also might have an RA. So what I tell students to do is literally create a map similar to the one you see on the left side of this slide, where you kind of put the people you could reach out for different topics. And it will be really helpful if you also put what topic you could go to with them. But even just putting that list of names, reminding that you have a bunch of people you can reach out to as a support. One of my clients, we literally went to the website, took pictures of those people, put their location, put their email under it. So when they hit a challenge, they kind of went back to that cheat sheet and knew who they can reach out to for different challenges. It's one of the things that can be done to help prepare the student. It can be done with a parent, it can be done with a coach. And then also consider academic coach or ADHD coaches like me as an option to support yourself. Here are some strategies I want to emphasize. Support groups and body doubling. I don't know if you guys know what body doubling is, but the idea of body doubling is it's a productivity strategy that is about staying present with another person in the space, even if you're working on other individual projects. So kind of think of it when you were a kid and you did your homework in the kitchen with your parent around, how better you were at doing it than when you were by yourself in your room and you had potential of playing on the computer or reading a book. So that's basically the same idea. Buddy doubling can be happened virtually. It can happen with hey, Rumi, want to go to sit in the library and work, and you work on your science project and they work on their project. So that's another thing, or another way to do body doubling. Some academic centers and students for disability services or accessibility services offer body doubling spaces, an opportunity where like, hey, you can come and sit and work with others. And I strongly recommend it. I participate in one a lot when I need to try to stay on task. Study groups have a lot of benefits, and they're obvious kind of for everyone, but for those with ADHD, the social aspect combined with the academic aspect is like a double win. I want to take a moment to talk about movement and exercise. Movement is really important. I don't know if you guys ever saw when someone was like walking and studying their lines. There's something in the brain that really gets activated when we move and learn. And if you have ADHD, it's even double. So I strongly encourage listening to lectures while walking. I strongly encourage putting things on big boards on the wall and writing on the wall, not moving your location. Movement is critical. Exercise. You remember the medication and how amazing it works? When you exercise and you have ADHD, some of those chemicals automatically happen in your brain. So exercise is extremely important. And exercise can be 5 minutes of running on campus, and it could be a whole two-hour routine of yoga and swimming. It really individual, but it's important that you understand as a student how beneficial exercise can be for your brain. Taking your medication if you take ADHD medication, but also if you take some allergy medication. ADHD brains hate boring, repetitive, and they hate to be told what to do. So having a task novel, urgent, and interesting is the magical track that helps ADHD brains. We can't always have every task novel, urgent, and interesting, but there are things that we can do. Like if you get a writing assignment, you can break it into smaller tasks and put deadlines that you need to submit to the writing center maybe, or to a colleague or to the TA. And that will make the task more urgent because it will have other additional deadlines. Maybe by making it more interesting, instead of me like only writing a paper, maybe I'll record a YouTube about it and then have the AI transcribe that. And then I'm going to make that into my paper because I'm so much better at making videos than writing. So making it interesting. And novel could be, today I'm going to go outside and study in my hammock. Novel doesn't have to always be totally new. But you know what's really cool about college? Many times you change classes a lot and you change professors a lot. And that novelty is amazing for the ADHD brain. Break tasks into smaller tasks. Break tasks into smaller tasks. Really important, works for almost everything. Like when I had to prepare for this presentation, I just broke it into a lot of small steps, made it doable. My number one tip for any student with or without ADHD is go to talks, go to lectures, come to class. It's really hard to succeed in college if you don't go to classes. So go to classes. Choose your seating smartly. If you're one that gets up a lot, choose it by the aisle. If you're one that needs to not see anyone else, try to be in the front row. Use a note taker. Ask copy for notes from other students. Get permission as an accommodation to record the lecture, but then also remember to record it. Put a reminder, put a post-it, put an automatic, one of those reminders that come out by location. Record the class. And then after you recorded the class, convert it to transcript. So you could read it. So you could have it in two modalities, hearing and reading. Get permission to stand in the back of class. Drink a lot of water. There's a bunch of studies that have come out now that your ADHD medications work better if you drink water. So even that exercise you did would work better with drinking water. Use fidgets. I'm a big fan of fidgets, as long as they're not loud ones that bother people. But as an adult, you can have a ring that you fidget with. You can have a bracelet, a keychain of fidgets. It doesn't have to be the same kind of children-like fidgets that we think about, and they're extremely useful in keeping our body moving and staying focused. These are some writing assignment tips. Meet with your professors to clarify understanding. Create visual outlines. I have a student that used Legos to build a history timeline and wrote on each Lego the time and then played and moved it all around. And he did that to help his brain kind of put something that was so abstract, which is like time, in a way that he could follow. Use time blocking, kind of create schedule for yourself like you would have created classes at high school, and no homework time, assignment time, visiting professor time. Put things in your calendar because your working memory is use assistive technology. Submit something is better than submitting nothing. So I'm going to guess that any faculty member that's on this talk or hears this talk will agree with me that we cannot give a grade if you don't submit anything. So submitting something is better than nothing, because perfectionation, trying to get it perfect, is one of the problems. And we don't need perfect. We need at least a starting point. Okay, I'm going to faculty. I'm going a bit quick because I don't want to run out of time. Learn about ADHD. So thank you for coming and thank you for learning about ADHD. But if you're a faculty or a professor member, keep on learning. At the end, there'll be a link, and I'm going to also put it in a second in the chat. You could use that link to fill out a form that will come to me that will automatically send you my favorite 6 books about ADHD. And you can share it with your students. So keep on learning. And this applies also for parents, but also for students themselves. Learn about your own ADHD. Respect privacy. If a student is nice enough to come and confide in you that they have ADHD, do not share it with other people. It is no one else's business. He might have not shared it with other faculty members. In order to receive accommodations, they just need to share the letter with the information about what accommodations they get. They do not have to share why they're getting those accommodations. It's the student's choice and privilege to share. You, as the recipient of that information, needs to make sure that you don't share that with anyone. I cannot imagine this, but I did see this happen once, where the faculty member had a list of students with disabilities hanging in their office. Like, if you need to create that list because you have to control your accommodations, have it password protected on your computer. Do not put it in a public space where others can see it. Provide clear instructions and examples. And when I mean clear instructions, sometimes we think about instructions and we're sure where they're clear, like study for your exam. But for a student with ADHD, that might not be clear enough, because the question is that come up from that is, what exactly should I be studying? How am I going to be evaluated? Is it multiple choice? Is it open questions? And am I going to need to just repeat the information, or is there going to be like needing to process and analyze information? And the end is, how do I know that I'm ready? Can you give me an example of how can I tell that I learned, that I've done studying? Those are things that can help clarify. Provide written and verbal explanations. I provide video instructions sometimes that gives oral and visual, but also I can create a transcript from that I can use to create my written explanation. So strongly recommend that. Encourage note-taking, provide accommodations. Don't decide that you don't want to for some reason. If you have a problem with an accommodation, reach out to the Office of Disability. They're there to help you, or accessibility. They're there to support you. Consider allowing exams that are very long to be taken over multiple days. Use a variety of teaching methods. So if you are doing active learning, teaching in more than one way, you have a higher likelihood to get your message through and help your students learn. We used to say anything that we say to a student with ADHD needs to be said 7 times in 8 different ways. Foster open communication. Allow the students to email you. Allow the students to come meet you in open house. Encourage students, even if you are not available, respond in a meaningful way that they understood the limitation doesn't come because you're rejecting them, because rejective sensitivity is a thing in ADHD that we don't have enough time to talk about today. But if you are fostering open communication, you reduce that. And let your students stand and move if possible. Okay, parents. Some of this I said already, but build a support network for yourself too. Really important. Go to ADA, with ADHD, or CHAD, Children and Adults with ADHD. Find a network for yourself so you can support your student better. Okay? Practice self-advocacy. Support the student's emotional well-being. Remember that communication is a challenge. So clear communication also as a parent is important. You might want to say something and you might want to send an email too, or a text. Support medication management. Teach your children how to pick up their meds, what to do with their meds, where they should put their meds. Have a conversation and communication about that. And remember that college is more than academics. And as a parent, you might need to support some of the social, emotional elements, including like roommate negotiations and things like that. I speeded through some of it, so I wanted to give you guys a few minutes for questions. And I'm open to questions now. Have to figure out how to do that. Okay. There we go. I can see the chat now. Yay. Okay. Yes, so someone was talking about visual timers. So visual timers are timers where time is managed not only with a timer, but the time moves using information like this. So this is half an hour and it kind of like, it moves like that. There's even a version that looks like pizza, which is what I give some of my college students as a goodbye gift. So they can say, I have half a pizza of work I'm going to do now. I have a quarter of a pizza, things like that. So this is a visual timer that could help with some time blindness. There's also an app for this where you could put on your computer. And if you're a teacher of a classroom, there's like big ones you could put in a classroom. I also saw some people using them in the libraries to help people kind of stay on task inside a library. So my library at Loyola used to have these that we used to let people borrow just when they were studying on campus. Questions? Okay. Not everyone at once.
So there's a question. Do you need an official medical diagnosis to request accommodations at college? Would IEP be sufficient?
So it depends on the university. If the IEP is recent, there are universities that will accept it, but there are universities that will require an evaluation in order to receive the accommodations. It's very easy to find out. You can go to the website of the university you're considering, look at under documentation in the Office of Disability/Accessibility, and you'll find out what their documentation requirements. You can also, after you get accepted, you can also call. I strongly recommend reaching out to institutes in advance if you're in the college seeking process. And if you're already in the institute and they do require more than the IEP, they might even have resources where you can get evaluated for the process. No, most colleges do not cover any assessments of any types. No doctors, is not covered by universities usually. Someone just asked, what is a recommendation for a visual timer? I use Time Timer. The person that developed it has ADHD. I like supporting companies of ADHDers. Time Timer is the one that does these, but they also have an app that you can download. I do know Mac users, there's some kind of free version. There also are some other timing, like when I work with younger kids, I have this like sunset software that you can download. I do not remember its name, but if someone wants to email me that question, I can send it to them. It's a software where like there's like a picture of a sunset and it kind of sets, and it's a way to kind of tell time for kids that really can't even read numbers yet. But timetimer.com or app, I mean, that's where you can find it. I put a link over here. The link is to register for my newsletter, but also if you use it, you automatically will get the list of the books. So if you press that link, you could get like a little form, you subscribe, and you should be getting the list of the books about ADHD that I recommend. And if for some reason it does not work or you need anything additional, this is my email. Any other questions? Okay, so one of the questions, what helped me the most navigating college and graduate school, and did I have an aha moment where I figured out how to navigate it all? So one thing for me, I went to undergrad and master's in a different country. So my graduate school was here and I did a lot of preparing. That really helped me. I prepared how to advocate, what will be the critical accommodations. And the aha moment for me was finding an advisor that not only understood ADHD, but was flexible in many, many things. My advisor literally would walk on campus and talk with me and not only meet sitting down in his office. So once in a while I'd come into the meeting and he'd look at me and he's like, okay, let's go outside and walk and talk. Because he'd see that I'll be like so hyper that there was no way that we can have this conversation sitting down. So finding an advisor that you can work with was the number one aha thing for me. Of course, I'm really honored and happy that I had the chance to speak here because I find this topic really important. And I know I rushed through kind of the end because I wanted to make sure I give you guys all time for questions. But one question that I get asked a lot is what can students that are already struggling do to get out of where they're kind of stuck? Like what can they do to kind of unstuck or recover from and the number one thing I say is go reach out to that network. And the second thing is start with a small step. So reach out to the network and start with trying to fix one thing. Don't try to fix everything at once. Fix that one thing. Maybe you are failing 2 classes. Fix one, focus on one. Okay, maybe you are just behind with one professor, but you're behind 6 papers. Focus on one. What if you are struggling with your club and you're not going to activities and they want to focus on one thing in the club that you can participate in? And I think that's true for adults with ADHD in general. When you feel really, really stuck or overwhelmed, or you feel that burnout happening, choosing a small bite that you can make a difference with, that you can change, will make a big difference. Baby steps have amazing effects. So online classes. Have captions always open. Allow students to record. Have transcripts available after class. Have active questions. You remember I asked you 2 questions in the beginning? I start when I do online classes, I make sure to have active learning. So I say to we're going to be learning this and this and this. And these are the questions that should guide you when we're learning. We're going to try to learn the reasons for World War II. So make sure that you understand that that's the purpose of the talk today. And this is what we're looking for. We're looking for. So having that active component to the learning. I also sometimes ask at the end of every class for students to write a question as if they would write a question for the exam. So I sometimes even use them for the exams later. But that also helps active learning. So even online, there's things you can do to have more active learning. I ask students to take turns in creating polls. And the polls also help students stay engaged. And I do emphasize open cameras when possible. I know a lot of students with ADHD want to walk when they're in an online class. So I kind of go back and forth with that, but I do encourage when possible, especially if we're going to do a discussion component. I insist that cameras are open on discussions. Anything specifically with the online class that you wanted to ask about? Anyone learned one new thing about ADHD? Share in the chat if you're willing, the one new thing you didn't know before about ADHD. So I feel like I did something today. The question here, are teachers not required to learn the topic of ADHD? Yes and no. College professors are not required to learn the topic of ADHD. College professors are required to learn their field of expertise. And then the high school, middle school, elementary school, kindergarten, they learn very limited. And it's not endless. It's just not sufficient.
Thank you everyone for coming. I know there may still be extra questions coming in, and if Dr. Karidi is willing to stay to answer them, that would be great.
Yep.
But I do want to be respectful of everybody else's time. Before you leave, if you're able, there is a short post survey we would like all the participants to complete. I put it in the chat now. I'll also send it again in a post email about this session. So again, thank you, Dr. Karidi, for sharing your expertise with all of us. It was very insightful. I really did like learning about visual timers and ways to help students with ADHD, like even simple things of giving them space to stand up and move around. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. And yes, I'm happy to stay here and answer questions if anyone has.